a playlist original.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Live or die. Make your choice.
What are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
I'm not even gonna swat that fly. I hope they are watching. They'll see. They'll see and they'll know. And they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly. They're here.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face. The blackest eyes. The devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
It's 22 years later. Norman Bates is coming home. Psycho 2.
It's starting again.
Rated R. Starts Friday at a theater near you.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to Blockbuster with your host Gaius and Jackson. Not going to change the intro because Jackson is still on the show. He's just very, very busy with school. But in the meantime, we are officially kicking off Tales of Horror. We did this last year. It was a little bit different last year because we started it because there was a strike. There were writers and SAG strike, so there was very little news. So we were trying to basically make up for all the time we were missing without reporting news. So we dedicated a whole 2 months to horror movies on the show, and we wanted to do it again this year. Albeit this is a little bit different because we're not in a strike and it's very busy news cycle, but we're still trying to fit it in and get it all done. And actually, this is the very first Tales of Horror episode that we are recording. And we got Wes on as a special guest for this one, the very first one. He's been on the show before. He talked Halloween H2O with us before, did a deep dive on First Man, and he was willing to come on for this and suggested a really good movie. So thank you for joining me on this one.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me back. I love coming on the show. I think it's an honor that I get to be on the first episode of Tales of Horror this year. That's really exciting.
Nice, and this is a fun one too. The whole point of what we wanted to do with Tales of Horror last year and this year, the guests are either they either like horror movies, they might have a horror movie podcast. Like there's they love the genre in one way or the another. I mean, we could probably have anyone on, but having a love for the horror genre helps because we want to celebrate that and then also celebrate fans of the horror genre. So
Absolutely.
I wanted to, before we got into your movie, I wanted to ask you, how old were you when you got into horror movies and what made you kind of want to get into them and kind of stick with that genre a bit or continue to watch them?
I think I must have been like a little kid. Like cartoons were scary when I was a kid. Like kids movies were they were actually very scary when I was a kid back in the early 90s. So I grew up watching things like Brave Little Toaster, Gremlins. These are nothing now, but when you're a little kid and that's your deep dive. That's like that feels intense and scary and like
Right.
so. Probably like it would probably be Gremlins. Gremlins was probably like the first like true horror because Brave Little Toaster it has scary sequences, but it's not like a horror film. But I think
Right.
Gremlins would probably be the first like just it's a horror film for kids, but it's still a horror film, and that was probably the first like true dive into the horror genre that I had ever seen as a kid, and it definitely like changed something in me. I thought it was like so scary. I loved the practical effects that it used.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the movie's gross in a lot of ways, but it was so much fun. And like that was the first time I was ever able to like sit and experience something scary and gross, and like, but it was
yeah.
for like the fun of being scared and grossed out, and it was great. And I think like from then I've just kind of had this insatiable hunger to watch a new scary movie. Like whenever I get the opportunity, whenever something comes along, I'm like, I gotta go see that. It's
Nice.
they're so much fun.
Yeah, I grew up thinking that Gremlins was like a true horror movie until I got older, and I was like, oh, I think this is well. One, people consider it a Christmas movie. We actually covered it during Christmas on the show last year. It was Jackson's pick for Christmas. I watch it
Nice.
every Christmas, but like I guess it's also intended to be a kind of a fun, wacky family movie too. But I mean, it is pretty gross, and there are sequences that if you're a kid, it would frighten you if you were a child, like for sure.
Absolutely.
So but yeah, I grew up thinking that was a true horror movie, and then I got older, I was like, oh, I guess it isn't. But
Yeah.
I think it's funny because Spielberg was involved in that, like he produced it. And I think it's funny that he gets involved with certain things like that because his movies are so whimsical, and then he kind of wants to throw in like he'll produce the Gremlins, and he co-wrote Poltergeist, so he kind of has that in him to like want to scare people. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's pretty interesting. But yeah, Gremlins is I think still depending on. I mean, there are still images in it that still are freaky and gross and like.
Absolutely.
And I know that movie we talked about on the show last year. It was intended to be a lot darker. Like the mom was supposed to like bite the dust in that completely.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's so interesting that it's also viewed as like a family film and a holiday classic that you can watch during Christmas.
Yeah.
So
It's so
so
much fun though.
yeah, can totally understand why it would freak you out as a kid. And there are certain cartoons that like not which aren't intended to be scary, but they just have scary sequences when you're a child that definitely stand out. You're like, I can't watch that even as an adult. It's like left a mark on me when I was like 5. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff like
Definitely.
that too. Interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so the cool thing about Tales of Horror when we have guests on, it works both ways. So in case people didn't listen last year, so either guests will come on, like we have a list of movies, and of course, some of them, the list consists of movies that we didn't cover last year. We just kind of Jackson kind of threw it together. But there's also movies that if the guest was like, hey, like those are great, but I have one I want to do, they could come in and give us one, and that would be the case. Um, and Wes's case, there was a couple on the list that he picked from, and he gave me an option of 2, and we went with one of them because we've never talked about it on the show, period, at all, not even bringing it up once. And I thought it'd be cool to kind of revisit it, and I actually revisited it last night for the first time in forever. So yeah, let everyone know what movie you picked to discuss.
Oh yes, we are discussing Psycho 2. That is what I discussed. The 1983 sequel to the Alfred Hitchcock classic, directed, I believe, by Richard Franklin and
Yep.
written by Tom Holland. Not Spider-Man, Tom
Not
Holland.
Spider, not Spider, not Spider-Man.
That
Yeah,
always
yeah.
throws me off too.
Yeah.
But
Child's Play, Child's Play, and
yeah.
a few others. So yeah, that is funny though.
But
Yeah, it does throw me off too. I actually,
yeah.
Tom Holland. I think this Tom Holland added me on X, and I didn't realize that this is
Wow.
when it was Twitter. This is when it was Twitter, and I didn't realize. This is when the other Tom Holland had a Twitter page. He doesn't. I don't think he has one anymore. And so I just saw the ad or follow, and I didn't check it, and I was like, oh, what Tom Holland's like follow me in, and it turned out to be this one, but it was fine. Which is he's totally cool too, and he has made some pretty fun movies as well. I mean, he directed Fright Night and was involved with Child's Play. He directed that as well, so
Yeah.
he is definitely a horror genre guy, and he went on a limb and wrote this one. And I I think this would be a daunting task for anyone to take on
Absolutely.
because
I would not touch this.
we brought it up before we even got on that I avoided this movie for a really long time because I'm a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock's original movie, and I think a lot of people love Psycho. It is a true classic. I watch it every spooky season around the same time. So either I will a little before Halloween or on Halloween. It's always the one I watch kind of closer to the date or on the date.
Yeah.
So I avoided this one. I actually, I bring it up right now. I haven't seen the third one or the fourth one. I know the fourth one was like a made for TV movie, and then the third one I actually did get a theatrical release, and it was directed by Anthony Perkins, and it bombed. I was actually surprised to find out the third one bombed so bad because I was also surprised in research to find out that Psycho 2 made decent amount of money. It was pretty well received when it came out for the most part. Uh, considering it was a sequel to like a huge classic movie, it only cost $5 million to make and made $34.7 million at the box office. It when it opened, it placed second behind Return of the Jedi during its opening weekend. This is how
Wow.
old this movie is. So it did well. So that's all. I was surprised that the third one, didn't do well based on that, and it seemed like this one was
Yeah.
well received. But there could be a lot of reasons why people probably like we trusted you with Psycho 2. We didn't need a third one or even a fourth
Yeah.
one. This one's a really interesting one to learn about too, just like the making of it, and I learned some people didn't really get along on this particular movie either. That kind of surprised me because I would have noticed that watching it
Yeah.
because they play off each other really well, and we'll let you know who these people are. Um, there's a lot of stuff that there are a lot of reasons why it shouldn't work, and I watched it last night, and it's been a while since I watched it, and it really does work better than it should. I mean, someone sent me a message. They were like, "Dude, that movie has no business being as good as it is." Um,
Right.
and that's the kind of vibe I got from it. What was your first experience with it, and what did you first think about it when you saw it, and have things kind of changed in your more recent
Yeah.
viewing of
I
it?
mean, that was my feeling too. I was like, there's no way this is going to be any good. Like, there's no way. Like, and nobody really talks about the Psycho sequels. People talk about
Yeah,
Friday the 13th sequels. People talk about the Halloween sequels. Like every, big horror franchise, everybody has a few sequels that they love anyway, but nobody really talks about the Psycho sequels ever. And so
yeah,
like, I had no expectations that it was going to be any good. I was like, this is going to be silly. And like it took me a long time to like come around to like being in the right mood to just throw on something that I thought was going to be silly and fun.
yeah.
And I think they were like all four of them were streaming at some point on some app. I can't even remember. And I was like, today's the day. I'm gonna watch all the Psycho movies. And so I watched all four of them in a row. And
Okay,
I
cool.
was
You
actually
actually
like
seen
kind of
all the
surprised.
sequels too. That's okay.
Yeah.
Um,
And I was surprised by
now
how
you
good
at
like
least
they
this
all
one
were.
was.
Like
Are they all
yeah,
good? They all have
especially
like
this
their
one.
own.
I mean, third and four, they're definitely not as good as two, and two is
Okay.
definitely not as good as one. But like, I was surprised that they were all watchable and enjoyable. Like I was like, wow, okay, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
um, it was just really surprising. And like nowadays we have legacy sequels all the time. Like they're rebooting
Yeah, this is
everything
interesting.
all the
That's interesting
time.
about. I guess this would be
So
considered one, right? Because this came out 22 years after
yeah,
the
so
original,
like I
and
mean, people were
that's what we're dealing with now,
yeah.
right? This day and age. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so I
crazy.
mean, like,
Yeah,
I can
I think.
imagine people kind of being skeptical about it when it first came out. Like, do we need another one? It's been 20 years. Like, but then
Yeah,
like the surprise I imagine would have been nice too. Like when it was actually good. So
yeah. I avoided it like the plague. Like I said, I haven't watched the third or fourth one yet for similar reasons of like, oh, I don't want to ruin a good thing. Like I feel like I got lucky with Psycho 2, actually enjoying it. But it took years and years and years for me to watch it, and finally a friend was like, uh, dude, it's actually not bad. And he was like, let me preface with this, like, it's not nearly as good as the first one. Like, don't think it's going to be anything close to what that was, but as its own beast and what it tries to do, it's pretty good, and it actually kind of doesn't go in directions that you think it's going to go. And I mean, I again when I was watching it last night, I think the last 10 minutes of the movie, um, where there's all the well maybe a little bit before that, but there's just a lot of twists and turns that happen with like who you think's doing what and like all that stuff, and it really, I mean, it really surprisingly works. And I think what makes it work the most is that it didn't just go down the route of and by the way, guys, if you're listening to this, we're assuming that you know about it or have seen it. The movie came out in 1983. um it didn't go down the traditional route of like, oh, Norman Bates is free, maybe he shouldn't be, and this is him straightforward just doing all of these things. It could have just been that. And I think it works because if you're imagine watching this in 1983 and not really knowing what direction it's going to go in, okay, that's what you're kind of thinking while you're watching it, like what else could be going on. And then it introduces all these little kind of plot twists, kind of almost towards the end, back into the movie, with other people from the another person from the first movie coming back as well, and being involved in the plot, and then having them be connected to someone in the current plot, and then also having someone else be connected in the like plot, in the all the information like before even the first movie, with Norman's mother and all that. So there's a lot of really fun stuff that they did, and I think I give it credit for attempting to try a lot of things that mostly work. And I was impressed with it even again watching it for this. It really holds up well, and it is it's an 80s horror movie, so it definitely ups the gore factor. It gets like, I mean, it's not like the kills are actually, no, there are some graphic kills in it, but as compared to like what you saw in the original movie, which is very very tame. I think it was like, hey, this is 1983. We're in the middle of the resurgence of the slasher genre, so we can't be too skimpy on the blood and
Right.
gore. So there is some stuff in it that definitely more graphic than suspenseful, but also a really interesting character setting and psychological thriller, I think, too, in a lot of ways that made me enjoy
Yeah.
it.
I think it's
I was like,
surprisingly funny too. Like there's so
yeah,
many good and it's not like outright laugh out loud funny, but like there's just like a layer of humor over just about everything. Like it's almost like they realized they couldn't top Alfred Hitchcock, so they decided to just be like, let's just do the best we can, but also have fun with it and make it a fun movie as well. Because it's a much more fun movie than Alfred Hitchcock's original, I think.
yeah,
Just like the interactions between the characters are a little bit more humorous, a little bit more, especially Norman and Mary, and the way he flirts with her at the beginning is so
yeah,
cringe, but also very funny. Like,
funny, yeah.
uh, he gives her what does he say? He says she smells like a toasted cheese sandwich
She's
at some
good.
point,
Yeah, I was like, which is
and
something
that's like
he
a
would say,
compliment.
right? Yeah, yeah. Like, oh, okay.
It's so funny.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and like if it does feel like some of it leans into satire a little bit, like
Yeah,
it's kind of making fun of the aspects of the genre, like how characters just matter of factly tell other characters. I think it was like the sheriff that tells like Mary that like when they're down in like the cellar or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, this is where he used to keep his mother's corpse," and like
yeah.
yeah, he's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Yeah," and he just dug her up, and that's like it was just like, and he tells her so like not how a normal person would take, and then she doesn't take
Took her from
I
the
mean,
grave.
now, of course, we know that she doesn't take the information like a normal person would because she does know some stuff already. Like
Mhm.
we don't know until later how much in on things she is, but like it's just funny how matter of factly he tells her that,
Yeah,
and like it's just they kind of lean in a lot to like the ridiculousness of some of it,
yeah,
but it's
yeah,
funny and it works.
absolutely.
I mean, I don't know, but not too over the top though. It like doesn't go too
Yeah,
far in the satire where it's like, okay, I can't tell if this is like a spoof or what,
yeah,
but like it definitely has fun playing with like kind of the circumstances that Borman is in, and like, would you want to be around someone that like realistic? I mean, this movie deals with a lot of like, just so you guys don't know, like it does take place 22 years after the first film, and Norman has been released from a mental institution and he's returned home to Bates Motel, trying to continue a normal life. And this movie kind of deals with the whole aspect of, can you really after what he did, um, can you kind of rehabilitate yourself and live a normal life after that? There are definitely some people that don't believe that. Marion Crane, Janet Leigh in the first film, her sister Lila, who's played by Vera Mills, she's back in this, and she certainly doesn't believe that, which is why she's doing some scheming down the road too. So it does pose an interesting question, especially as things are unraveling. It's like, is Norman crazy? And if someone drives him crazy, is that still in him too? I mean, it does appear like through most of the movie that he is making a valiant effort to
yeah,
live a normal life, and I think that's what Anthony Perkins does really well. There's like a bit of sympathy that you see, and in it, like I didn't really view him totally as crazy in the beginning of it, even though I've watched
yeah,
Psycho and what he does in that. What you see is someone that's genuinely trying to put that behind him. Like even just watching him work at the diner and not really know how to do basic things like that, but he's doing the best he can, and it just seems like all these like outside forces are in the way of that. Particularly like Dennis Franz's Warren Toomey, who has been working at at
yeah,
the motel while Norman's been away, and he is not the best guy. Uh, ever. So there
Yeah.
are these outside forces, and because of all these outside forces, when things start to go awry, it does look like Norman is losing his mind again. I want to ask you, I mean, how much about the plot did you know before you actually sat down and watched it for the
Zero.
first time? Zero. Okay, so like when
None.
you were watching it, were you like, "Oh, Norman's going crazy," or are you like something else is going on before they started like throwing in other, I guess,
Oh
hints
man.
as to what was going on?
Now I'm wishing I could remember, because like now that I know that it's just like the first one. Once you know the twist, you can never
Yeah,
like
yeah,
unknow it. Um, I think I thought it was Norman. I was like, he's got to be going crazy again, right? Like it's Norman
yeah,
Bates. He's the villain of this franchise. So, but like at the same time, like, and this is a testament to Anthony Perkins' performance. I felt really bad for him. I was like, oh, he's really trying. He's really trying to
yeah.
be
No,
better,
he
but
is. He's
he's
doing the
just
best he
crazy.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then of course, Toomey's all harassing him the entire time. And later on in the movie you find that there's other characters, with working together, conspiring against him, essentially trying to like prove that he's still crazy, or to make him go crazy again so that he
yeah.
gets
Just,
caught again.
just,
And like
just fucking with
I
his
felt
universe,
for
man,
him.
for no reason.
Yeah. And Anthony Perkins just does such a good job with it.
Yeah. The insinuation is after the movie's done, almost is perhaps if they would have left him alone, he might have been fine.
Right. He could have
I
probably
mean,
been
like
okay.
he probably could have been okay. I mean, what kind of like, um, I think it's interesting too, and I know we're gonna hop around a lot. I think it's interesting, and like I said, if you haven't seen it, this is a very old movie, so big spoiler alert. I think he only murders one person himself, right? In this
Right.
movie, like it's
In the
and
entire, I'm pretty
and
sure. Yeah.
and it's and it's at the end of the movie. It's the
Yeah.
very end of the movie, which at that point it's just like I I don't think all that would have happened at all if they had just left if everyone had left him alone. If he had just gone back and kind of lived at Bates Motel, maybe worked at the diner, uh nothing really goes wrong with like all the stuff that he like when the first time he gets to Bates Motel after he's gotten out of the mental institution, he goes back home. He thinks he sees, of course, someone in the window, like where like basically how his mom he sees his mom in the window in the first one. So like at the start of the movie, he's being messed with, or he thinks he's seeing things, or all that. So like if none of that had happened, he probably could have lived a relatively
Yeah.
normal
Poor
life,
guy.
and we could have had a movie that was like, yeah, rehabilitation is possible after
Yeah. The
doing the
hopeful
things he
sequel to
did.
Psycho.
Yeah, very
Where-
hopeful. Um, I was torn though, even though like it's very sympathetic performance. Like once I was watching it last night, I was like, well, thinking back, like what did he all do back then, right? Because it's just not contained in that first movie. Because
Mhm.
there's they talk about in the first movie that there other missing people and all
Something like
that stuff too, right?
seven victims or something like that,
Seven
right?
victims, and of course, like
Yeah.
the mom and the
Hmm.
boyfriend, and like so a lot. He did a lot.
Yeah.
So while I was
Yeah.
watching it, I was like, would I really want? Could I believe that that guy can be fixed, or like you know, is he really a murderer, or is he just the relationship he had with his mother just made him mentally
Right.
unstable because she wasn't a mentally stable person either, from what you gather learning about her. So I I was torn watching it, how I would feel about I mean, he did a lot, so that'd be a lot to kind of forgive or get over.
Yeah.
It seemed like back in that day, they were probably like in like the '80s, they would have just been like maybe in a perfect world, like they were like, hey, that was that weird guy that did all this stuff. This is where he lives now, and they would just leave him alone and
Right.
like leave him be. Um,
He'd kind
that
of be
is the
like the
kind
scary
of vibe
guy
I
at
got.
the end of the street. Yeah.
Yeah, but
That all the
just don't
kids
mess with
would
him.
doorbell ditch and run away. Yeah. So, but like, I feel that too. I think, it's Norman Bates is a really weird character because Anthony Perkins makes him so sympathetic. But when you really add
Yeah,
up all the things he did and does, he's really an uncomfortable character. Like I would never ever be in Mary's position where she's like actually staying that. I know that she like has a plan and she,
yeah,
puts a door up or a chair up against the door, to kind of keep him out of her room while she's sleeping and stuff. She takes
right.
her steps to protect herself, but I would never ever in a million years be in that position, even if I fully believed that, and I do to some extent believe that anybody can rehabilitate and become a better person if they have the right support and the right intentions. To some extent, I believe that
Yeah,
almost everybody can.
yeah,
But like that said, Norman, I don't know. He's an uncomfortable character. He's got holes in the walls where he watches people shower. So like, and he's not doing that
yeah,
as mother, I don't think. So like, he's a creep.
yeah.
But like, uh, Anthony Perkins just like it's one of those things that's so conflicting because Anthony Perkins plays him so well that you want to feel for him, but then you add up the things he does, and you're like, he's
Yeah.
creepy.
And Meg Tilly plays Mary Loomis in the movie. I didn't realize that this because I didn't. I know she's Jennifer Tilly's younger sister. I didn't know how potentially. I guess she had a moment in the '80s, like around this time. So they basically said between basically 1982 to 85 ish, 88. Oh wait, actually 88. She was nominated for a Golden Globe and Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for the movie Agnes of God, and then she was in this, in The Big Chill, and Masquerade, and Valmont, all within like a span of a few years.
Wow.
And she was considered like the young new it thing for a little bit, and I it's interesting because I guess we can talk about it. I guess from what I read, her and Anthony Perkins did not get along making this movie at all. The Some of the trivia I read said that Meg Tilly was not allowed to watch a lot of TV growing up, so she
Mm,
did not know the full like uh, how revered Psycho was. So when this was getting made, like in the course of it getting made, this was kind of billed even while it was being filmed as like a comeback vehicle for him. And I guess, according to legend, he heard her saying on set, like, why is everyone talking about him? And kind of made a big deal about it. And that kind of started the whole them not getting along. There's other
damn.
stories too. She also talks about how she didn't really get along. She said the worst working experience she ever had was with Richard Franklin and Anthony Perkins on this
Ugh,
movie. I mean, it was so bad that she didn't go to the premiere. So
wow.
that's how bad it was. And I know Anthony Perkins, they said allegedly tried to get her fired because he didn't think she was good enough. And this is all after the whole, who is this guy and why is
Yeah.
everyone talking about so much? Now, granted, like in 83, or when they're whenever they're making this in the 80s, like she's younger and maybe she didn't know, and like maybe she, my thing is, even if she didn't watch like a lot of TV as a kid or a lot of movies as a kid, whatever, I feel like when you get a job, you would like learn about like, oh, this is the second one to what? Why was this a
Right.
sequel
I
to?
mean,
It's like, yeah,
working in film, you just learn not to question what people above you are saying, period.
yeah,
Even if it makes no sense to you, you're just like, okay, yep. Because if you question it, they're going to be like, oh, that person's subordinate, like immediately. Like, that's just
yeah.
how it goes. So,
Yeah, I would just, and then also, just like basic, like, I should do research on like
right.
the sequel I'm in, because like,
Yeah.
it's clearly Psycho 2. So like, let me find out what the first one's about. And I feel like even in the 80s with a little bit of research, you'd be like, oh, it was directed by Alfred Hitchcock.
Right. It wouldn't take
He was
long
a
to know that
he was
it's
a
a classic.
legend then, and it was a
Yeah.
classic. And Anthony Perkins was a big deal. I still think one of the biggest crimes in movie history is that he didn't get nominated for an Oscar for the first Psycho,
Yeah. Absolutely.
somehow Janet Leigh did. Nothing against Janet Leigh. I mean, it's a classic role
Yeah.
for her too, but like, uh, I don't understand how you didn't get one. But I mean, it's still like the role was so massive and so, uh, you know, so intense and so memorable that like it became so linked to it that it became hard for him to even land other roles that weren't similar. Everyone
Yeah.
wanted to cast him as that. He kind of viewed the Norman Bates role as a blessing and a curse, and actually wasn't too keen on doing this one either. He was going to turn it down, and their backup was Christopher Walken if they could get him to do this, and that would have been interesting.
That would have been
um,
very interesting.
but it was going to be this was going to be a made for TV movie if they couldn't get Anthony Perkins, and I guess they sent Tom Holland was sent him a copy of the script, and he actually really did like it and like what they were trying to do with it, because there is a Psycho 2 novel that Robert
That's
Bloch
right.
did write, and it's not based on this at all. It's I guess the studio read his book, and the book is basically they're making a movie about Norman Bates' life. So it's very, if even back then, like in 1982 when he wrote it, when it came out, it was very meta for its time, and
Way
it
too
was
meta
supposed to
for the
be
80s.
yeah, and it was supposed to be a comment on like Hollywood, like slasher movies and all that. It was making fun of them, so there was a lot of satire in it. Um, and Universal, I guess, when they read it, they were like, "No, this isn't going to work." They actually wanted him to abandon that and write something else, because I think they were like, "Hey," I think they saw too what was going on in the early '80s, where all these, even then, like these horror franchises were coming out. Before this, you already had a Halloween 2. You already had I think by then like a Friday 13th part 2, and probably a third
Right.
one was cut, like either probably already out by the time they were making this one as well. So
Yeah.
they were seeing the potential, and I think sequelizing uh, a franchise like this. And so I guess when they read his book, they're like, we can't make fun of this thing that's already emerging out of like Hollywood, because probably won't go over well. So
Right.
that's why they, I guess Richard Franklin had worked under, he was like a student of Alfred Hitchcock, so that's why they wanted him to do it, direct a movie. And then Tom Holland was hired by Universal to write the script, and then write something completely different from what that book was, and that's how we got what we got here. Based on, I mean, the premise of the book sounds interesting, but it does sound like it was maybe ahead of its time
Absolutely.
in
Yeah.
terms of like
I would love
making
to read
fun of
it. I've
stuff.
heard of that, and I've meant to look into it, but I've never gotten around to looking that book up. But it sounds so interesting. Honestly, I feel like if they were ever to bring Psycho back nowadays, they could
That's exactly
adapt
what they would do.
the book, the Psycho
This
2.
book, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I think they would. I think they would now, like, because and also like meta stuff is more like people are aware of it more, and
Yeah.
they have like the audience is a bit smarter. They're like, oh, this is making fun of this. It's kind of like making fun of. So I mean, some people still don't like the whole meta, especially in
Yeah.
like the Hollywood stuff, where it's like, oh, we're making fun of like, you know, the industry and all that stuff at the same time. Scream has done that for years and it's been successful. I mean, even when Wes Craven did in '94, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, a lot of people didn't get it. Then that was a movie that kind of became much more revered later
Yeah.
uh in years, because in '94 people didn't quite understand, like, oh, we had this whole series of Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and now you're telling me that none of that was real and they were just films, and like, so like that was, I think hard for some people to
Yeah.
digest and like take. So that, I think that would have been really hard to do with this, but I do agree with you. I think it could have been it could be an interesting thing to do now. But I'm glad that they kind of went the route they went, like,
Yeah.
as simple as being like, let's just catch up with Norman that many years after all this stuff happened, and you know present it as like, would he be normal, or would he still be kind of unhinged? And since there's so many layers to the movie,
Yeah.
you're allowed to think that, like, once he starts seeing things and like, all that stuff, when he's at the diner and like it, and like, I think it's like one of the first things at the house where it's like, don't let that whore back in my house or something like that. I think he's
Yeah. On the
referring
note.
returning to Mary. So like, you're thinking like, oh, is he writing these things himself, or is he like, the thing in the diner seems like something he could have done himself? So I mean, when I first watched it, I'm trying to remember back to it. I couldn't think of a twist, thinking, because I didn't know anything about the movie at all, because that's how much I avoided it. I didn't know the plot. I didn't know anything about it. So when I was watching it, I didn't think of any other explanation other than like, he's losing it.
Right.
Um, and granted, I kind of like, why I watched it again. I was like, oh, that would have been easy, and I just still would have been entertained by it. But I'm glad that it was something much more than that. And honestly, guys, if you haven't seen it, the layers kind of come out gradually, and then by the climax, it's just like there's a bunch of stuff where it's
Yeah.
very twist and turny.
It has a
I forgot how
wild ending. Yeah.
Yeah, I have forgot how much happens like towards the end,
Yeah.
where I was like, they were just like, and it's a long enough movie. It's not like it's a 113 minutes, so it's not like it's a relatively short horror movie, but it wraps itself up as if it's like 90 minutes long, where it's like,
Yeah.
all right, we gotta like wrap up all these loose plot threads, which I think is pretty interesting. But yeah, to go back to Meg Tilly, I don't know what her kind of issue was. I guess being a young actress, but I do want to say, ask you, knowing that they didn't get along, I would have never guessed that watching it, because they do play off each other well. I don't know if I want to call it chemistry, like it's romantic chemistry, but you definitely feel like her warmth for him and then his warmth for her.
Yeah.
Like and knowing that they didn't like each other, it's just like it I did couldn't tell that at all. And I just want to know
Yeah, I mean, they did
if you thought that
a
too.
very good job. Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think they did really great playing off of each other's, not letting their pettiness, because that's what it was. They were just both being
Yeah.
petty, kind of get in the way of their, performance. And I agree. I think they both just felt really warm to each other. She clearly has ulterior motives as a character, but like
Yeah.
as the story progresses, she starts believing more in Norman, and I think that reads very well in her performance. And I think Norman's performance of, you know, feeling like he cares about her and like that she kind
Yeah.
of gives him some sort of stability is very felt as well. So, I think that's great that they were able to at least put their pettiness aside, when they weren't trying to get each other fired, they were able
Yeah.
to
So
do well
like
with each other.
you have like two instances of like maybe one being like too young Hollywood, like I don't care who he
Yeah.
is, that kind of attitude, and then him being too old Hollywood, like who's this young
Yeah.
girl? Like so like it's just like two like things coming together at once.
If they were the
I
same age, they'd be best friends.
probably but
Yeah.
I mean the fact that he tried to get her fired, I mean like they were like, dude, we're probably too far along to even do this right now. And but I blame that the scenes they play together, like they are genuinely good. And like I mean it's her job as Mary, I guess. Like for people that don't know, her character ends up being the daughter of Lila, who is Marion Crane's sister, who's played by Miles. And she, you know, she's kind of been planted there by her to essentially drive Norman crazy so that he does something crazy so that they can prove that, like, hey, we told you, if you let him out, this is what would happen. Um, so she is kind of a plant and she's supposed to be working for her mother. But what she does, she doesn't necessarily start to do the things that her mother wants to do, because there's one instance, I guess, where these two kids get in the house and there's a murder there. Um, and it looks like, of course, Norman could have done it, right? And that's what the plot wants you to believe, and that's what everyone wants you to believe. Um, and when they're asking like where he was the entire time, she covers for him and said that he was with her the entire day, that they were going on a hike or a walk or something like that.
Yeah.
And even he's surprised that like she covered for him, because he, you know, how they try to set him up to believe that something might have happened with him is that they locked him down there, right? And he couldn't get out or whatever. And the mom is very upset. She's very upset. Like, why did you give him an alibi, basically? And she is like, he couldn't have done it because he was. We locked him. I locked him in a room, so he couldn't have like been the one to have done it. And then she's just like, I don't care. Basically, like the whole point is like to like basically make him believe make everyone believe he's gone mad, so like they put him away again. And honestly, that's
Yeah.
a cool kind of. I actually thought it was cool how they brought her back in that way. I mean, she doesn't have like a huge part in the movie.
Yeah.
She is a uh kind of a plot twist that they introduce like fully later again, where you're like, oh, like she's so involved in what's going on.
Yeah.
And that, when I first saw the movie, I thought that was the first like really cool thing that they did, was like, oh, they not only did they bring her back, but they brought her back in a way that, oh, like, so now this isn't as straightforward as we thought it was. Like, perhaps Norman isn't going crazy and there are people making him go crazy. So I thought
Yeah.
that was really cool to include her in that way, in a way that made sense. And then also making Mary her daughter, because that was like an interesting thing too, because, I'm sure it's one of the things where her mom probably fed her so many stories about what Norman did to her aunt and her
Right.
sister. So I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty interesting. I think the one thing that the movie is missing is if Mary was affected by those stories so much, because it doesn't
Yeah.
really seem like, because she's so willing to go through with the plan, right, and like kind of drive him
Right.
crazy, but she so easily gets out of it based on just knowing him and like getting
Yeah.
to know him, where she kind of feels like, I don't think anything's wrong with him anymore. So I would have liked a little bit more of like what psychologically that meant for her, maybe learning about that as a young child. And I mean, it's probably like
Yeah.
another plot thread that couldn't be explored too much, but I thought that could have been something that they could have dived into a little bit
I
and
think
see
that's
what
a
her
really good
intentions were.
point. I've never thought of that before, but like it would have been interesting to see Mary kind of struggle with that, like, like kind of like righteous hatred for Norman, that was
Yeah,
instilled upon her and through her upbringing, and see her wrestle with that as she like starts to realize that maybe, what she was taught growing up is not necessarily accurate. That would have been a cool. That would have been maybe another like whole subplot, but that would have been. I
yeah.
agree. That would have been really cool to see.
Yeah, and I think too, like if once you know how what that she's in on the stuff that's going on, there's things that she does early in the movie that seem very like it's just on purpose. Like he invites her to stay at the hotel with him, and she turns it down, says she's staying with someone else, whatever, right? And then she goes back to him, I think it's the next day or so, uh and she has her stuff and she's like, can I take you up on that offer again? And he's basically kind of loosely talking about like he basically is like, oh, I thought you were gonna stay with someone else. And she makes the comment like, have you ever like slept next to someone like making love in the middle of the night? And I felt like she said that because of his kind of very
Background,
warped
yeah,
towards background with women, and like to kind of
right,
see if that would get like once you know why she's there. That line to me was like, oh, she was just trying to say that just to see if it would get a rise out of him or if it would like do anything to him. And it doesn't really do anything. He responds to it in a way that is kind of like a joke, and like he doesn't really get crazy or like gets weird with it. But I think that's why it felt like that's why she did it. I feel like her mom fed her things to say and do with him that would make him uncomfortable or make him potentially snap. So the more
yeah.
you like know how involved she's in the plot, you're like, oh well, that doing something like that, like, oh, she was trying to do something to maybe mess with his head.
Right, and then when they're eating the sandwich, and she's like, "You got any knives?" And she goes,
Yeah,
"Here's
yeah,
one."
yeah.
She
There's
doesn't
one.
bother cutting it herself. She goes, "You cut it."
You cut it. Yeah, gives him like. And by the way, guys, every knife that is used in this movie, I've never used a large butcher knife to cut a sandwich in my life.
Never.
Like like you can easily use a butter knife. All right, if you don't have, I mean, I guess a steak knife will work too. But this movie is full of characters using extremely large knives to cut the most mundane things. Like there's like, and that's what another thing I think like when you talked about earlier, how I think some of it is played for laughs. Like,
Yeah,
it's very on the nose, like him being handed like a big knife like that to cut a sandwich. Or,
yeah,
the whole there's another one, I think it's the diner with the cake or something like that. Or he's like
yeah. The
there's a lot of
big
stuff.
knife that's sitting there.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of when the one where like Toomey's like yelling at him and like he's
Grab it,
looking to his
grab that
right,
knife.
grab it, knife. Yeah. There's just a lot of large butcher knives. And by the way, I mean, also if you knew his background, I wouldn't necessarily want him around a bunch
Around
of
a
large
knife.
butcher knives myself. Yeah. But I was actually laughing to myself, especially the one where he's cutting the sandwich because it was like it's just a tiny fucking sandwich on the plate, and it's if you haven't seen it or if you have seen it, if you have seen it, it's a very abnormally large butcher knife, and like those things are so on the nose, but that had to be done on purpose, like it just to be kind of funny
Yeah,
and like, and I thought that was kind of like a really nice, fun move on their part to kind of make the audience. I think like I'm trying to imagine watching in '83 in the theater and like being like, why are they letting him have
yeah,
like such long, like sharp weaponry at his disposal, like a lot. But there's a lot of moments like that, that's why I think it's interesting just knowing what her intentions were in the beginning. That there were intentions just to make him lose it, and um, it's interesting to see like where for her where that plan changes for her, or where she starts to think of him differently. Um, I was trying to pinpoint the moment where she's like, I don't necessarily want to go through with this. It seems like you know what, she is playing him from the start, but like I can't picture. I don't know what moment it was where she's like, oh, I don't think he's as bad as everyone's making him out
right.
to be. And I don't know, like if you noticed one thing in it that was like, oh, like perhaps my mother's wrong, that makes her kind of change her idea of who he is.
I wonder if it was when the teenagers came in and she had him locked up in the attic. I wonder if
Oh
that
yeah,
was
that's
like the
true.
turning
Yeah,
point.
because
Yeah,
he couldn't have done it. Um,
yeah,
and now does she know that her mother is straight up murdering? Like is that part of the plan? Like, does she know their mom is like dressing up like her, or like because she knows we're all like like all the wig and the dresses of it's all hidden. Like
yeah.
everyone like we're to believe that Lila has been sneaking in, like putting it on and like basically doing her own part. Maybe they're both doing their own part, dressing up as mothers to drive Norman up, up the wall. Um,
Right.
but like there are murders that Lila definitely commits to like kind of frame them and put them on Norman.
Yeah.
Um, I wasn't fully aware if like Mary was in on that part of the plot so much.
So I guess that's the problem with the plot having so many layers, is that I'm not
Yeah.
sure actually if it is necessarily Lila or if it's even the what's her
Oh,
name at the very end,
oh,
Mrs.
the Emma Spool, the
Spool, yeah, or if it's
yeah,
Miss Spool,
yeah.
because it's
So
never really revealed. It's still ambiguous at the end, like who killed who
so like
exactly.
so like the main like the real twist at the end says like because we're mentioning there's a waitress that Norman works with in the diner, introduced as like Mrs. Spool and named Emma Spool, and we learn like later in the movie after all this stuff has gone on where we learn that like Lila apparently has been driving him crazy. Mary was in on it. Like all this other stuff goes down, and you think like there could be much more movie like everyone's
Right.
gone right, and she kind of reveals to Norman that she's his biological mother and that his mom was her sister and adopted Norman as an infant while she was institutionalized, and that uh, and then that she was the real murderer, I guess, who had killed anybody who tried to harm her son. So I guess that is also like the layers too. Like it
Yeah.
could have just been her the entire time. Um, I mean, so I guess there isn't a scenario where Lila did any of it. Maybe she was just dressing up,
Yeah, I
and
think she
Emma
might have
Spool was
just been
on,
dressing up to scare
and
him,
then,
to freak him out. Yeah.
yeah, and then Emma Spool is the one that ends up killing everyone.
Yeah.
Uh, that is interesting because Mary, when people end up dead, I wonder if like Mary's like, what the fuck's going on? Because it's not
Yeah,
him,
like what? This wasn't part of the plan.
especially the teenagers, because she's like, he was locked up for real. Like we locked him in the room to freak him out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, she was the one, I guess, killing everyone. So that's Toomey. I was gonna say the doctor. No, the doctor is accidentally killed by Mary.
Oh yeah.
Robert Loja gets straight up knife to the chest, and then on
Yeah.
top of the knife to the chest, falls over a banister, and then like lands directly on said knife in chest, which is so interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just that's when the movie goes like completely bonkers.
Yeah.
Um,
It is bonkers, but it's so fun at that point.
um, so I want to ask you this too, because like Norman, there's one point where the doctor's on the phone, like where does Norman realize that something is Norman going crazy, or is he pretending to go crazy before he even gets the phone call from like the doctor who's like, "Hey, like this is not, this is not in your head. Like they were messing with
Right.
you." Um,
Yeah.
because he's already going off the walls a little. Like it seems like he's going off the walls a little bit, and then he's on the phone with it. He knows it's the doctor's voice, and then he still
Hmm.
pretends like he's talking to Mother. I guess to kind of bother. I assume to get to her to bother Mary, but like that
Yeah.
was like when I was watching it, how much of like is Norman actually losing it, or is he gradually learning what's going on and is pretending to lose it? That's what I was trying to figure out too while watching it, like what his
Yeah.
kind of position was uh, at that point in the movie. It's kind of hard to
It is
really
really hard
tell.
to. Yeah, I have no idea. I think this movie has such an absurd plot. It's really hard to like when you scrutinize it, really like like stream it out and find where all the threads connect. It still works
Yeah,
as a movie, and it's still so much fun to
yeah,
watch, and the performances are great. Um, and I'm not dissing the structure at all, but like
no, no,
it is absolutely absurd, and very hard to like iron out all the details when you really sit down to think about it, because I think maybe Norman probably is going a little bit crazy and maybe is actually having some flashbacks and hearing his mother's voice at some points, maybe. Um, but I think maybe like it's
yeah,
so confusing for him because that's mixed in with Emma Spool calling him and being like, "I'm your mother," and it's also mixed with Lila Crane being like, "Norman, this is mother calling," and it's just like he's got the voices in his head and
yeah,
three other people calling him pretending to be his mother. So I think maybe
yeah,
like there's just a lot going on under the surface.
yeah. It is interesting because he is like, especially the way Anthony Perkins plays it too, because
Yeah.
he could be convinced that he's going crazy, and I and the way he plays it too is so interesting because There's a moment where the sink is overflowing with blood in the bathroom, and it happens in the toilet too. And like he's like going crazy. He thinks like, I mean, he clearly thinks like he did something, and she's
Hmm.
telling him like you couldn't have done it. Like you couldn't have done it. And he's like, how are you so sure? And she's like, I just know like you couldn't have done it. And I was watching. I was like, all right, is he knowing? Is he thinking that she might have be up to something? And like, why would she not know if she was? I mean, if she wasn't involved somehow, or if he really does think that these things are happening to him.
Yeah,
I was trying to uh figure that out, man. Like it's really like
that would be
it'd be
clever
interesting
too.
if all
Yeah,
these things were true. If like he was thinking he was losing it until he realized he wasn't.
and then he started
you know,
messing with them back.
messing with
Yeah,
him back. Yeah, like but that is what I was like wondering. I was like, oh yeah, I mean, like it is interesting to think that like you know all those plot threads could be true, and then like once he realizes that, like once the doctor, especially when the doctor gets on the phone with him, and
yeah,
he's just like, oh, like, and he's like telling you what's up, and like if that moment of being clever, or if he's just like still gonna pretend like he's hearing his mother's voice just to now fuck with her because now he knows that they've been fucking with him, that
yeah,
is a whole nother interesting thing to uh think about too.
yeah. That's crazy. I never even would have thought that he was kind of counter messing with them. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, because I was the only thing I think of. I was like, is there anywhere when he's like, I am being played? I mean, or is he, you know, it is an interesting thing to think about too. If he's definitely thinking he's trying to be rehabilitated, he's trying to be a better person, and uh, and he's seeing these things and like all the and hearing these things, whatever. What that would make him doubt his sanity, right? Until he would have
Right.
a reason not to doubt it. Uh, and that is something. Like that's why something I thought was interesting. Like the fact that they were able to hang those plot threads like together.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Um. Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. It's like that's a lot of stuff to make work, and they make it work well.
Yeah.
Um.
It's actually
And I do.
incredible the way you've laid
Yeah.
that all out. Kind of blows my mind.
And I do like the way, I mean, like to have it be like, okay, the whole time you had like you had Lila, you had Mary, so you're like the whole movie, like that's all you're thinking, like these murders are clearly not him, so someone is
Hmm.
doing them. And the fact that they don't introduce this final thing until like the last few minutes, that is like, oh well, like this person's been doing it the entire time. Um, that is what makes that is a very bold move, and to do that in the last few minutes and like have it have no real like no thorough like more explanation into what's going on. I thought that was pretty cool too. It's like, oh, like we think we know where this was going, and and it's completely not.
I mean,
And
normally I completely normally the when they do that, when they like reveal a twist in the last
no,
10 minutes that wasn't set up at all beforehand. Normally I hate that, but it works here. I don't know
yeah,
how. Normally that is like one of my biggest pet peeves. Like I think it's like the original I Know What You Did Last Summer kind of does that, where it's like, oh, it's
yeah,
the spoiler alert, it's the guy you hate at the beginning, but they didn't set up that he possibly, it was out of nowhere. So normally that pisses me off, but I don't know why it works so well in Psycho 2, but it
yeah,
just does. They managed to strike just the right balance with all the absurd plot threads and all the ideas they wanted to implement. They just managed to get that balance just right, and
yeah,
I love that ending. It's shocking, but it's also a little bit like it's so shocking that it's a little bit humorous at the same time. Just like, oh, shoot,
yeah,
when it happens. I love it. I love how they handled that.
yeah. I thought it was great too. And like and thinking about that, so there's a scene where Mary is like she sees someone looking at her through the peephole in the bathroom wall, and she calls out to Norman, and then he's downstairs and out of reach, so he couldn't have been the one peeping through the peephole.
Yeah,
So I guess we were to believe is that Mrs. Poole that's been doing that
I'm
was like
assuming so.
hiding
Yeah,
about. Yeah,
because
that's
she
so
does confront Lila later, doesn't she? She goes, "Why are you in the house?" And Lila was like, "That wasn't me,"
yeah,
or something.
that wasn't
Yeah,
me. Yeah. So that's
yeah.
all really interesting too. For horror movie fans that want to talk about some of the kills and gore, we talked about some of them, but was there any kills in particular that made you go like, ugh? Because there's some pretty gruesome ones in
Yeah.
this movie.
When Lila gets stabbed in the mouth and it
No,
goes out the back of her throat. This is, and they did a pretty good job. They didn't go all out Friday the 13th or Halloween, with these kills. They were still trying to be like,
yeah,
we are psycho, so we're gonna, be a little bit classier, I guess, but they were also like, it's the 80s, let's gore it up a little bit. So they struck that balance pretty well. But that one, the Lila's kill definitely gets me. That it's pretty gruesome.
yeah. I mean, I think it's crazy because it's old Hollywood actors. They did that too.
Yeah, it's
That's
insane.
the
Vera Miles getting stabbed in the throat. Crazy.
that
It
is the
blows my mind too.
that's the one that like that's what got to me. I was like, man, I mean, that's
Yeah.
crazy that they went that far, and like they probably had to like cast her and make it all right to like get
Yeah.
the prosthetics and stuff.
It's
Like
amazing.
it's a gruesome. That one's pretty gruesome, and of course we talked about the one with the doctor, the getting knifed in the chest. Who he gets knifed accidentally because like I don't know why he sneaks up on Mary like that.
Right.
Because at this point, the doctor knows that Mary and Lila were in on trying to drive Norman crazy, and like he sneaks up on her because she's stressed up in the whole. Because at this point, Norman is. It seems like he slipped into insanity. Like he believes that he is hearing his mother and like all he's going crazy again. And Mary, to convince him that he's not, like puts on the outfit and the wig and like goes up to him and like tries to like talk to him as if like
Yeah.
no, this is mother, get off the phone, mother's not on the phone, whatever, try to convince him.
Yeah.
And this is like clearly not working. And so she goes like on the phone, the other phone line, to like talk to him on the phone, like to be like you're not talking to mother, like whatever. And then the doctor sneaks up on her and like it's like does a whole gotcha, and she turns around and like knife out, just stabs him in the
Ugh.
chest because she got startled. And then he falls over a banister, and like I said, like it would have been okay if it was just a fall down the bottom of the stairs, but they made sure that he hit a speed bump on the way down, or like the knife hit a speed bump on the way down, and gets like jabbed directly further into the chest, and
Ugh.
it's just so it's so gruesome.
Yeah.
But I have to go with you on the Lila one was the surprising one because it's just the mouth knife in the mouth.
Yeah. It's so vile. I
Yeah.
love it though.
So do you think that the ending itself, after she Emma Spool reveals like all this stuff, like because he kills her at the end, is the ending telling you too that he is still crazy? There's something in him that's off too. Like maybe everyone was right, and
Yeah.
because like there's no true, like unless I miss it, there's no true reason for him killing her. I mean, like as he does poison her first, right? And then he like not
Right.
like and then
Wax her with
knocks her.
a. That's right, because the T10. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's an
Or it
insane
seems like
ending.
and the ending is
Yeah.
like really ridiculous, and like I was like, I was wondering what that ending meant, like for like what
Yeah.
they were trying to say about him, like if because
It's like he
like I
needs
said,
a mother,
this is
but
the
he needs her to
only
be dead.
person he kills in the movie, right? In the whole
Yeah.
movie, which I also think is a brilliant stroke of genius too, to have this movie centered around like him being potentially the one that does it, and like does everything in the movie, and it's not. He only gets one kill in the movie, and
Yeah.
it's her. But I did wonder what that kill meant though. Like if it was like, oh, he is, maybe, they're all right. He is kind of out to lunch too. Like he's
Right.
not
I think
ever
he just
gonna
has too
quite
much
be.
mommy trauma, So
Yeah,
the
it
second
could
he
be.
learns that he has a mother, he's like, "Oh, I got to kill her now. Like I can't have a living mother. You must be dead."
Yeah, and I mean that could be it too, man. I mean that to have this person, this overbearing person again,
Yeah.
even though she claims to be doing these things for him and like to protect him, like maybe that ending is supposed to be like I don't need any more
Right.
protection.
And it's
Like
also
I can end.
interesting
Okay, so,
because the voice in his head after he kills her is not her voice. It's the same voice that Norma
yeah,
Bates had. So it's like the mother that lives inside his brain isn't changed by the fact that he learns that Emma Spool is his mother. Like that's
Yeah.
another interesting part. Like there's like a third mother that is fully constructed in Norman's brain, and that's like
Yeah.
that's the mother supreme almost. You know?
Yeah, and it's interesting because some people I just looked up said that he kills after he learns the truth about Mrs. Spool. He kills and preserves her corpse as a vessel for his resurgent mother personality. So that would be the intention of him killing her, so he can have another person to represent mother for him. So that's
Yeah,
another
that's
interesting
interesting.
interesting
Yeah,
thing to think about as well. Again, a lot of cool psychological layers in the movie. I mean, uh, so I mean that is interesting too. So like maybe the ending isn't just about like him killing her because he doesn't need her. Like he kills her because he does need, uh, you know, this kind of physical manifestation of what his other mother was to him too. Because like I said, I
right.
mean, we all know that he dug her up and kept her around the house to give the illusion that she was alive. And I think that's probably why the last shot, which is a very cool looking shot. I mean, it's the poster shot for the movie, um, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's just him standing on the stairs with like kind of like the house in the background, and like this kind of like blue uh like silhouette looking thing. Like it's a
Yeah,
really cool shot, but then like the
it's a
light
pretty
is
shot.
on, but the light is on in the background at the house to kind of gets to show that this cycle is like starting over
Yeah,
again.
and the voice is
And
like
that
yelling at him to open the hotel again. Like, get
hotel,
that hotel
yeah,
open.
and yeah, because like there's a
We
really cool
can't
sign
live off of
before.
nothing.
Yeah, there's a really cool shot of the sign, the base hotel sign that has like no vacancy shining, and then that the no shuts off and shows there's vacancies. So it is like this. It does kind of show that I guess killing her recreates
Yeah,
the cycle again for him to kind of have this like manifestation of who mother is, and
yeah,
I mean there's so much interesting. The more you like, talk about it, there's like interesting things that are going on in that movie that are way uh way more interesting than they have any right to be. I think like
right.
that. I mean, it's cool. I mean, I love all the misdirection. I love like like what you learned about the thing. Well, that Lila must be the one killing everyone to make him look crazy, and it, like no, her intention just to make him seem crazy just by dressing up as his mother and like you know
Right.
calling out to him and then like uh just being kind of yeah, like that is like what we're supposed to think. And then like this, lady, even though they don't give a ton of explanations how this because she looks like a feeble old lady. I don't know how she was walking around
Yeah.
taking out teenagers and like grown
She's
men.
like 5'4" too. She's
Yeah.
itty bitty.
Yeah. She and apparently this was actress's last movie too.
Oh,
But she looks like a really you only meet her I think once, right? And there's the diner
yeah.
scene before like where he's working
Right at the beginning. Yeah.
at the beginning. I mean it's a cool thing to like drop her in the one scene and then like reintroduce her at the end. I mean, we talked about this, it was a little different, but we talked about this when we did The Sixth Sense, and Jackson thought it was cool that like the twist in that movie is at the very end of the film and there's no other explanation after that. Once it reveals itself that like that is what was going on and
Yeah.
Bruce Willis was dead, it happens at the very end and then that's it. So I think that
Yeah.
is kind of what this does in a different way where like all these things that you've been watching for a good hour and 40 some odd minutes, here's the explanation right here.
Yeah.
And that's it. And
Mull
that's
that
it.
over on your way home. Yeah.
And that I
Exactly.
think is a bold thing to do in a movie like this. And I know they probably deserve a lot more credit for what they
Yeah.
were like able to accomplish with it. I mean, I, I was still impressed. When I watched it yesterday, I was impressed by it. And
Yeah.
because even I was like confused by some of the misdirection and be like, oh wait, no. So like I was trying to keep track, like who killed who in this. I'm like maybe like, and that's it. Like no one, like she just killed everyone. But thinking
Yeah.
that like did Lila do anything? I like, or she just playing extra grandma drag, and that was it, just to make him crazy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, imagine
uh,
if the police were able to actually solve this one, like at the end, and they rounded up all the people in the car. They got Emma Spool, they got the Loomises, they got Norman Bates, and they're all trying to get the story straight. And they're all just imagine what the process would be trying to get like the information from all these different
yeah.
people on what really happened. It's so funny.
yeah, like that is so crazy. Like to think that like and I think it's also interesting too because all this stuff is happening around Norman. Like I said,
Yeah,
like I feel like none of this would be happening if they had left him alone. There'd be no
yeah,
reason for Emma Spool to like go around killing people to protect her son. There'd be like no reason like for any of this stuff to happen. And like, but it's like, yeah, I like, that's what I think is interesting. His intention uh was to be a normal guy again, or at least try to be and live a normal life. And whether that was in solitude or with like potentially with a new friend, uh, I think that was pretty interesting. So I don't know
yeah,
that. And I also, I mean, in writing it, they're like, let's not make him the crazy one until the very end,
yeah.
because like
It was
and
pretty clever.
and that what the ending does imply too is that he isn't fixed. If like if he needs like that persona to kind of like be present, whether even if that persona isn't alive. He could easily kept her alive, but like
Yeah,
what he knows of his mother, like really, the mother that kind of dictates things and like tells him what to do, in the sense like, that he became accustomed to as he got older. Like it was like, killing her, but then preserving her to make it feel like
yeah,
she's alive. But like, I mean, which and that kind of has its own like, psychological things to really think about.
yeah. It's really crazy. I mean, like, I'm 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 uh, I'm glad this isn't like a true story because this would be pretty wild. Somebody's like, I need a dead
I
body
mean,
mother to.
I mean,
I
honestly,
mean,
like
things have happened for sure.
if you break it down like a true crime story, it is interesting. So you have this guy who did all these awful things. He gets out 22 years later.
Yeah,
there are people that believe he shouldn't. This one lady in particular who is the sister of a woman that he killed 22 years ago wants to drive him crazy. So she starts to dress up like his
yeah,
dead mother and make it seem like he's going crazy. Plants her own daughter in a scenario where she is like in his life so she can help drive him crazy. We are led to believe that Lila is probably maybe killing all these people because I mean, once we learn that it can't be Norman, especially once we realize he's locked in that room when the teenager dies, we're like, oh, it has to be Lila. But no, no, no. Lila gets killed by somebody dressed up as mother, so maybe it was Norman now, because we don't know we don't know
yeah,
yet what's going on. And then Mary tries to convince him that he's not crazy, and then she finds her mother under the like pile of rocks. So then she's like, "No, Norman, you did do this." So now Mary thinks that he did it, and then she goes to stab Norman and gets gunned down by like the police. That's why
yeah.
that's why the ending is bonkers. Like once you like break
It
it down
is
like that,
so
it
bonkers.
like truly bonkers. And then you have this lady that was introduced in one scene in the diner as a nice old lady that works with Norman. Is actually his biological mother, and I wonder if it was like egregious to make that a plot point back then,
Yeah,
because I feel like because that's such a classic movie, like Psycho is such a classic movie. Was it egregious to be like? I mean, I guess we've kind of toyed with the psycho mythology even lately with like Bates
yeah,
Motel, the TV show, which is actually a pretty good show and like does a good job of like messing with that lore a bit. But I wonder if like in the 80s when this came out, where they're like, "Oh, that's a big bold move." Like, I don't know if I
yeah.
like that or if they
I
were down with it.
Yeah, I feel like it would without saying any spoilers, I feel like it would be related to like how people are reacting to the third act of Alien Romulus, in a way.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's like some people are like, "Oh, it's so brilliant. It's a brilliant way to kind of recontextualize some of the lore and change things up a little bit." And then other people are really mad at it. Like some people I'm okay with Alien Romulus. Some people are really
oh, I
mad
loved
at
it.
that movie
Yeah,
though. And so like I'd imagine that the
yeah,
reaction would probably be similar to that, back in the 80s. Like some people were like, oh, how dare they mess with the lore and legacy of the
yeah.
great Alfred Hitchcock Psycho. And then other people were like, I don't know, I thought it was kind of cool. And for me, I think it works. I think it's, you know it works because you don't have to really, like, the first Psycho is perfectly standalone by itself. Like
Yeah,
it
if you
works
want to
so well
ignore
by
that
itself.
that these
Yeah,
sequels, if you want to be like, "Yo, these don't exist," you could, and it would
absolutely.
end. It would end perfectly, right? And every time I watch the original Psycho, I'm always floored, um, by the actual ending of it. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the doctor guy explaining everything at the end because
Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of like, you know, in case you didn't understand what was going on, guys, this
right.
is like here's why this happened. Um, Now I won't. The actress delivery of all that stuff is great. Like I think it's well acted, but I just don't like the whole like explaining everything. But I'm always left unsettled with like how it ends because he is fully his mother at
Yeah.
that point. Like when they said that he has a chill, like can I give him a blanket? And when he gets the blanket and the thank you is not his voice, it's his mother's voice. Like the fact that he is like so fully gone at that point. And even like Anthony Perkins like stance in that scene, like sitting in the chair is different. It's like way more feminine than like you normally would be. And like I don't know, I like that is the perfect ending for that, just showing that like,
Yeah.
this guy finally broke, and like this is why he broke. And then also the other psychological things, like he probably, he really did like Marion, right? He was into
Yeah.
her, and the mother part of him is what made him like kill her, because like
Yeah.
this thing inside of him was like, no, this thing is making you feel things you're not supposed to feel, like get rid of her, like it like that. I mean, there's so much cool things going on with that, and like you said, you can like leave that alone. But I think what Psycho 2 does well is like it offers another explanation of like, all right, that many years later, with proper help, could he be normal? And
Right.
I think you have a movie where you have someone that is trying to be normal, and then once you realize like all the obstacles that are coming up around him, uh, like I said, like if they would have left him alone, he probably would have been cool. But what
Yeah.
I do like about that ending is just like there is part of him that's not okay still, because he wouldn't have
Yeah.
did what he did to someone, who reveals herself to be his mother, because he's like, that's what he needs, I
Yeah.
guess. So he's still not quite right. So I love like what it leaves you with by the end of it. Pretty interesting stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
way more interesting than it should be. I mean,
Absolutely.
if you are like some of us who wanted to avoid the movie because you're like, you love Psycho, um, it's worth a look. I think what took me, I mean, I remember the first time I watched it, and this is just a product of one movie being made in the 60s, another one being made in the 80s. There's no like real visual aesthetic that makes them similar. Like there's nothing like that makes it similar, other than like the final shot of the movie that kind of gives me like uh, a real nod to the original Psycho. I mean, that shot is like, yeah, that should be a classic horror movie shot,
Yeah.
because it looks so cool
It's
the
a good
way it's
shot.
like the way it's lit. But like it's so like aesthetically different, and that it I think that is what allows it not to be easily compared to the first one, where you can accept it as its own thing. You're like, okay, this
Yeah.
is not trying to be Psycho; it's trying to be its own thing. And if you're open minded to that, uh, I think you'll enjoy it
Yeah.
for the most part.
Absolutely. I agree. And the
Uh,
other sequels, you have to be more open minded for them because
so now I'm
they do get
curious because I
progressively
haven't.
worse.
So I'm open minded. Like, I mean, I think I should watch Psycho 3 and 4.
They are
Just to
fun.
see.
They are
I
so
mean,
much
if
fun.
I could watch the like remake of the original, I guess I can watch
Right. Vince.
those, because
Oh God.
the remake of the original is trash on trash on
So
trash.
bad. Yeah.
um, but like,
The third one's
yeah,
just goofy. It's just off the rails, like very weird and zany. And there are sequences in it that I was like dying laughing at. And
like,
then yeah, exactly. It was so weird. And then the fourth one is like a prequel, and it has the kid from ET. I'm forgetting his name. Elliot.
Henry Thomas.
Thank you, Henry Thomas.
Yeah,
Um, and he's playing a younger Norman Bates, and like while the older Norman Bates is calling into a radio show, and he's like, "This is my life story," and then it flashes back to Henry Thomas, and that one is absurd, and so it has this one, like Norman Bates is a total player. First off, like every girl that
oh,
comes to the hotel, he's hooking up
it's
with.
like a love. What? Oh well,
Yeah, every woman that comes to the hotel, he's playing, and
he's
one of the women says,
finally found his swag, I guess.
yeah, she goes, "You have a tongue like an elephant's memory," and I will never forget that
Whoa!
line. It's so weird.
What?
It is the dumbest,
That's
weirdest
great.
line ever, and it cracks me up so hard. And the fourth one's worth watching just for moments like that, because it's very strange. They're the third and fourth one are both, they're like, it's like there's one and two. Well, it's more
Yeah.
like there's one, and then there's two, and then there's three and four. Like three and
Well, it
four are
seemed
their
like,
own
from how
thing.
you describe it, like 2 was at least attempting to be like a legitimate film,
Yeah, yeah,
like with a worthy plot, and like being a worthy follow up to
yeah.
it. I wish they would have ended it there, like from what you're describing about 3 and 4, like
Yeah,
two. That
yeah,
would have been the perfect ending. That like to kind of be like almost in the same way that Psycho ends, where it's like, oh, like this is who he is now. Like this is
yeah,
like, he's there's no changing him really. I guess like this is like
yeah.
he's so far gone. Um, I do think it's funny that shot, because I was talking about how cool that shot was. It does become the poster, the official
Yeah.
poster of the movie, and I guess it was like they made that as a Christmas card for all of the cast and crew. That final shot, and the director did not like it,
Oh,
but the studio liked it, and the editor Andrew London liked it, and he was like, "All right, no, we're taking that Christmas card and making it the key art." And I
nice.
guess he came up with the tagline: "It's 22 years later, and Norman Bates is coming home," which says everything that it needs to
Yeah.
say as well. Also, some other interesting trivia: they really wanted Jamie Lee Curtis to play Mary, because that would have been a nice little nod to Janet Leigh
Yeah.
being Marion Crane, who is like her mother and all that. Uh,
That would have been
this
cool.
was around this is around the time that Jamie Lee Curtis she had done Training Places, and she was done doing horror movies.
Fair.
Because for everyone that knows, she was in Halloween, and she thought that was going to kick off her movie career in a big way, and it didn't as much as she thought it would. So then John Carpenter was like, "I have a part for you in The Fog," and then she did that, and then from there it was Prom Night, Terror Train, and then Halloween 2, and then she was like, "I can't do any more horror movies if I want to be taken seriously." So she, at that point, probably wouldn't have done it. But I wonder if she
Yeah.
maybe would have thought about it more. I mean, because they also said that there was a scheduling conflicts, and then she mentioned the Training Places stuff. I wonder if she would have been interested in that whole connection with her mom and doing it that way. But
Yeah.
um,
That would have been really
that
cool.
would that would have been cool to see. John Gavin, which is why Sam Loomis in this movie, because as we know, John Gavin played Sam in the first movie. He was busy as the U.S. ambassador to Mexico, appointed by Ronald Reagan at this time. So that's why he's
Wow.
not in it. So that's why they, By the way, the line delivery, I mean, that's how this acting was back then. I think the sheriff or someone brings up her husband, Sam, and then she just
Yeah.
matter of factly is like, "My husband's dead." And then
Yeah.
that's like that.
Yeah.
It was like, oh,
She's just like this bitter old woman. My husband's dead.
like it doesn't say anything else. Like, oh, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss," like
Yeah.
something along those
Yeah.
lines. Uh, and I just think it's funny because like that you need to explain where he is, like where is Sam, and it could
Yeah.
have been more like I don't know,
It
thought
always kind of
provoking, I
weirded me
guess.
out though that she ended up marrying Sam Loomis anyway. It's like you were dating my sister
Oh
when she got
yeah, sister.
murdered. So let's
I
get
guess they
married
got.
now.
I guess they bonded over their quest to find
Yeah,
her. Like,
trauma bonding over
yeah,
Janet or
um,
sorry, yeah, over Marion dying, I
that's
guess.
great. Yeah, but yeah, that cracked me up like out loud when I was watching it. He's like, asked her about her
Yeah.
husband. My husband's dead. I was like, oh Jesus. Not even how. Like just like that
Yeah.
was it. I guess that would shut that conversation down. Like, oh, that's all you
Right.
need
Like, oh, okay.
don't need to know at all.
Yeah.
And Fair Miles also said that she did not get to talk with Anthony Perkins much when they made the first one, because Alfred Hitchcock, they ran a very tight set and everyone didn't really get to socialize a lot. So she didn't really get to
Mhm.
really speak with him until they made this one. And she's called him very, very pleasant and nice on set. Yeah, 'cause the only one to get along with it was Meg Tilly. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
more
Meg Tilly shouldn't have said who cares about Norman? Why are people talking about Anthony?
no, yeah, I was talking about Anthony Perkins. I'm like, dude, you need to do basic
Because
research
he's the
on
star
the
of this
movie,
movie,
right?
Meg.
You silly goose.
Yeah.
And then then the critics at the time, Variety, said that it was an impressive 23 years after follow-up to Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 suspense classic. The New York Times said has all the characteristics of a conventional sequel to Hitchcock's 1960 classic, but as you watch it, you may feel as if you're seeing a couple of precocious film students play with artifacts found in the Hitchcock mausoleum. um,
Damn.
the Washington Post referred to the film as a travesty,
Oh,
masquerading as a sequel. They said if Franklin had any respect for the source material, he might feel a little protective and avoid outrageous as conceptually as well as literally nasty as the treatment of Vera Miles' character in the movie. Did not like
oh,
that. Psycho 2 transforms her once sympathetic, heroic supporting role into a hateful bit part and then kills her off with a revolting, obscene flourish. I mean, yeah,
it's
but
fair.
here's the deal. She would be kind of maybe hateful
I mean, we
after
see
what
this
happened
happen
to
all
her
the
sister.
time when in real true crime when people are released, no matter the severity of their crimes, even for crimes a lot less than this.
Yeah.
And like, you know, it always happens that the people closest to the victims, or the victims, if they're, you know, survived, do often speak out and bitterly,
Yeah.
and I think they have a right to. You know, it's their
No,
trauma.
they definitely do.
So, you know, it's a realistic character choice for Vera Miles, I think, and
Yeah.
it's one that makes sense. The part where she starts, you know, actively, you know, conspiring against a released, you know, mental patient is where, you know, I lose sympathy
Things
for
go.
her. But the anger
Yeah.
she has is I totally
Very real.
believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, he murdered her sister, and
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah. Oh yeah. Now, I mentioned the whole like this is an old Hollywood actress. I think, even though it's a cool horror movie kill, but I can imagine like people who like revered her, respect her, was like,
yeah,
why the hell did she allow her character to be like stabbed through the mouth? um, it's a
so
gruesome
wild.
death, man. It's a really
Yeah,
gross death, but yeah. Um, Roger Ebert said the film sustained the suspenseful atmosphere of the original and is better than the average slasher film, but the film was too heavy on plot and was too willing to cheat about its plot to be successful.
hmm.
Um, and then in retrospective reviews, uh, John Kenneth praised the film's depiction of Bates in human, realistic terms, deeming it admirably frank and sincere, and a great film on its own merits. Empire gave the film 3 out of 5 stars, calling Psycho 2 a smart, darkly comic thriller with some imaginative twists. It said the wittiest dark joke is that the entire world wants Norman to be mad, and normality can only be restored if he's got a mummified mother in the window and is ready to kill again.
So true.
um, has a 62% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is not too bad. Still fresh. And Quentin Tarantino actually enjoys the movie more than Psycho and said that this is Perkins' best performance of his career.
Nice.
Quentin Tarantino is always saying some off the wall stuff like that, so I'm just
Yeah,
gonna roll with it.
absolutely.
I do not think it's better than Psycho, but
No.
it holds its own. I
Yeah.
actually liked the movie so much after I got it when they made a collector's edition of it on, I believe Screen Factory did it, and it has a really cool commentary track to learn some more stuff about the movie. It
Nice.
looks great too. But yeah, I would need to not get scared and watch Psycho 3 and Psycho 4. I probably won't like them, but
They're goofy.
anyone
They're just goofy.
anyone that had doubts about this movie, you should check it out. And I want to know if you have any last parting words for it, like, and also what score you would give it, if you can score it.
Yeah.
You can do a letter
I
grade.
got
You
a
can do the letterbox 1 through 5 stars, however you want to
yeah.
score it.
I think like a 3.75, or like so close. Like, I love this movie. It's so much fun.
Yeah,
But you know, if we're going off a 5-star scale and Psycho's at a 5, it can't be a 4. It's got to be like a 3.75 ish. But like,
yeah,
it's still so good. It's so much fun. Um, I really like, and since Psycho is like the most spoiled film of all time, and like people who haven't seen it know the twist and stuff, it's really
yeah,
fun to watch Psycho 2 because nobody talks about Psycho 2. Psycho 2 is like maybe the least spoiled movie of all
yeah,
time. Nobody knows how that one ends. So like, that's the really nice thing about Psycho 2, is that if you really love Psycho, and you know, you want the experience of experiencing something in the Psycho franchise at the very least that is shocking and surprising, you know, Psycho 2 will, you know, might do that for you. And I think that's one of the reasons why I appreciate it so much.
yeah. I think I would be with you. I think it would get a 3.75. Like
Yeah.
I think Psycho was perfect. Actually, the first one.
Yeah,
I don't find anything
absolutely.
wrong with it other than like the whole like media explanation at the end. But like that's
Yeah.
not enough for me to score it down. But I will, like I said earlier, this is surprising just based on like I said, it has no right being as good as it is. And
Yeah.
I think it is a logical continuation of that story, and not in an insulting way, like where you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense. I don't buy that. Um, you kind of do buy like this is where Norman would be 22 years later, and this could be the reaction to him being out 22 years later. Um, and then, like we said, it goes bonkers off the wall towards the end,
Yeah,
and
absolutely
and then
bonkers.
like has a really fun plot twist too. That makes it stand out. And again, it deserves credit for like not trying to just copy the original movie and kind of finding its own way. And you made a good point. I think a lot of people, um, like a lot of people who listen to this one, they've probably seen the movie, so they won't care to be spoiled. But I think
Right.
what you said is true. Is that I still know a lot of people who haven't seen it and don't know all the twists in the movie, and that's a good point. Like Psycho is easily spoiled for everyone. Everyone knows that like it's Norman Bates, like dressing up as his dead
Yeah.
mother, and all that. Um, a lot of people have been lucky enough not to have this one spoiled for them, so I think that is another cool thing about it. You can go in fresh with this one and potentially be very surprised. I think you have to like maybe dial back expectations. Like it's not going to be the original movie, but definitely stands on its own in a really good way, though.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was a good pick by you. Um,
Thank you.
so yeah. And so just so everyone is familiar with you, are there any things that you're doing as far as like movie stuff, podcast stuff, anything you want to share, plug? This
So
is
I
your
have been
time to do
on
it.
hiatus actually for a really long time. this
Oh,
is
okay.
this is my first thing back, I guess you could say. Except I'm gonna continue my hiatus for a little bit while longer after this. But if you want to find me on TikTok, I am at Wespresso Films. That is also my Instagram handle, or you can search West Talk Movies, and that also brings me up. Um, and that's everything that I have going on at the moment. But I am taking a pretty big break. School has been crazy from all social media, pretty much. Not like a hard break, just like a soft break. But I will be back to making content eventually. So if you want to check me out, you can find me on those places.
Okay. And every Tales of Horror episode that we do with certain people, it will be previewed on our socials. So if you're bored and you see something that you're like, hey, because like the cool thing is you don't have to be the only guest on the Tales of Horror episode. Like if other people want to jump on, you can. So if you see one, you're like, I would like to be on that one. Just don't hesitate to reach out and be like, hey, is there room for
Awesome.
like one more? You can do that. Um, so yeah,
Thank you.
so you're pretty good with the conversation, and the more the merrier on some of
Hell yeah.
these. I'm glad this was the first one though, because last year I forgot what we did first, but it was like a very conventional like. I mean, it might have been Urban Legend or something like that because it was an anniversary around the time that we uh uh were starting it. And I actually
Right.
love Urban Legend. I'm not insulting Urban Legend at all. It's fun in its own right.
Yeah,
But
it's a
this was
fun
like
one.
nice, like out of the box choice because I don't think a lot of people would have picked it. Like I'm doing Bram Stoker's Dracula tomorrow. Like I didn't think that would be a
Hell yeah.
one to do. So yeah, this is all good. I'm glad you picked this one, and we will. I will still link what's his like TikTok and all his information, socials at the bottom of this episode if you guys want to follow him. And we'll link where you can watch Psycho 2 if anywhere, or just buy it because physical media is essential and you
Yeah,
should have it
absolutely.
if you guys want to own it. By the way, this has been the first Tales of Horror episode on Back to the Blockbuster. If you want to listen to us on a regular basis, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods. Those are all great, but we also have the Playlist Studio app. They are a podcast network, and they have a cool way to listen to our shows, and you can get that in the iOS store or in the Google Play Store. You can also find us on YouTube and subscribe to our page if you want to see all of our beautiful faces as well as listen to us. That is also an option. Um, it's going to be a busy time for us because we are also doing deep dives in the new show and try to plan our 200th episode as well, which is coming up
Wow,
very
200 episodes.
soon.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Depending on where this one lands, this might be 194, 195, depending on when we release it, because we have some. I'm juggling some ones we already finished. So we're getting very, very close to that as well. So it's a busy time, but it's a fun time. And we're excited to talk about all this stuff. Again, Wes, thank you for joining me on this one. Don't hesitate to ask to join if you want to come back on during Tales of Horror for over the next couple of months. You're more than welcome to join. If you have another movie that you want to do, actually, you had another movie that you were juggling with. So if you want to do that one, if there's we can do that one as well. So
Hell yeah.
options
I'd
are
love
open
to.
for you.
Thank you so much for inviting me to talk about Psycho 2. I always love coming onto this podcast. It's so much fun to talk to you, and I'm honored to continue to be in the pool of people you invite to come back.
Oh, nice, and always a pleasure, man. You always bring good conversation, and again, this is a good choice. So yeah, this is the first one of many, many more. Again, check out Psycho 2. You won't be disappointed. Keep an open mind. If anything, you'll find some humor in it as well. Some fun kills in it as well, and also really cool to see Anthony Perkins. I've always admired him as an actor. Also, very
Yeah.
interesting life that guy led
Yeah.
to. On top of being a very interesting actor. So yeah, definitely want to catch out. Thank you again, Wes. Thank you everyone for listening, and until next time. Peace out, guys.